Acun took over the club on the 19th of January 2022 from the Allams after a controversial ownership. Everyone was delighted with the takeover, including me, as we thought we was going to get our club back, and for a long time it seemed that way. Just 8 days after the takeover, Hull City had signed Regan Slater on a permanent deal, which still to this day is proven to be worth it. On deadline day, we signed Ryan Longman on a permanent deal and also loaned in Aliyah from Fenerbahce, Marcus Fors from Brentford, and Liam Walsh from Swansea. On the final day of the 21/22 season, Hull City's attendance was 18,399. To put into perspective how much that was at the time, our average attendance that season was 12,888. The positivity continued as Hull City signed Ozan Tufan, who ended up scoring 18 goals in 2 seasons despite being called fat and lazy. Terry was another great signing who became one of the best midfielders in the Championship and an African champion for his nation. Oscar Estepinian, who was Hull City's top scorer that season, and also some solid players like Benjamin Tete, Aaron Connolly, Matt Ingram and Cyrus Christie. There was notable failures like Figueiredo and Ebououi, however, overall a really solid transfer window. Some people discredited Acun in this transfer window as he spent a combined 11.5 million on 3 Turkish league players, which 2 of them being flops. Also, the Turkish bias remained as the manager at the start of the season was an ex-Turkish league manager, Jota Adelanze, who conceded 18 goals in 6 games before being sacked and replaced by Liam Rosenior, who had the 4th best defence in the league since taking over and more wins than losses, which ultimately kept Hull City up comfortably in the 22/23 season, clearly showing some positive signs. The 23/24 season was all about promotion for Acun. He'd been talking about how he wanted to do a Leicester and win the Premier League in the future, so his target for this season was to get promoted. We signed some really good players in the 23/24 season, such as Jadon Philogene for £5.8 million, who ended up being our top scorer and assister that season. We also signed Omar for 2.5 million, who looked solid under Rosenior, Aaron Connolly on a permanent for 1.5 million, and some of the best loans the Championship has ever seen, such as Liam Delap, who's now at Chelsea, Fabio Carvalho in January, who scored 9 goals in 20 games, Tyler Morton, who was one of the best midfielders in the EFL, and Noah Ohio, the most clutch player I've ever seen, scoring versus Ipswich, Coventry and Rotherham, all off the bench in just the 8 appearances he made. The Hull City team was widely considered the 6th or even the 5th best squad in the league, so when we sat 6th in March, it was no surprise. Liam Rosenior got nominated for Championship Manager of the Season, however just missed out on playoffs on the final day, leading Acun to sack Rosenior, becoming one of the most controversial sackings in EFL history. Despite Rosenior technically failing, it was probably our most successful season since the 15/16 season. So I think Rosenior getting sacked was harsh, but I guess it was kind of justified at the time. We replaced Rosenior with Tim Walter, a manager who had failed to get the best squad in the second division in Germany, promoted multiple times, leaving Acun to lose a lot of credibility. We lost more credibility when we sold Philogene, Greaves, Tufan, Seri, Connolly, and also a lot of loanies such as Delat, Morton and Cavalier all leaving. Despite making almost a combined 40 mil profit for Philogene and Greaves, we spent the money poorly on Kamara for 5.3 million, who many called lazy, Giles for 5.3 million, who got loaned out in January, he was that bad, and also millions on average players overall. We sold so many players for so much money in that season. So, to replace them with average players, I think definitely give Acun a bad rep and, lost a lot of credibility. Tim Walter was a disaster, won 3 games in 18 and played awful football, leaving everyone to blame Acun for his terrible decisions. Before the 2-0 defeat to Sheffield Wednesday in November, Acun said that no matter the result, he wasn't going to sack Tim Walter. However, after the fans were chanting Tim Walter out, and just saying how bad his football was, he basically had no other choice after the game but to sack Tim Walter, which eventually led to the appointment of Ruben Sellers from Reading. A very defensive man coach, however, I do think Ruben Sellers did a good job, and now he's got the Sheffield United job. It really shows how good of a manager Ruben Sellers is. In January, Hull brought in some good loans like Matazio and Louis Barry. However, they got injured straight away, leaving Hull with an average squad who stayed up on goal difference. Despite mid-table form and one of the best defences in the league, Sellers was controversially sacked, which led to more people wanting Acun out and losing a lot more credibility. They took about a month to appoint a new manager, which ended up being Sergej Jakovic. Of course, I'll back from the start and hopefully it works out for him. Of course, we've just come off a 2-1 victory over Sunderland. Of course, pre-season doesn't matter at all. But, you know, five pre-season wins is very impressive. And before the first game of the season against Coventry, at least we'll know the feeling of winning, unlike last season in pre-season. Acun also said some crazy things, such as he expected Ruben Sellers to push for playoffs despite coming in when the squad was 24th in the league. He also said there's no such things as racism in Turkey, and it's not racism if you didn't mean it. That's all things Acun has said over the past few months, which sparked controversy on Twitter. Also, the biggest news of the window, Hull City was also hit with a transfer embargo until 2027, meaning we can't sign anyone who isn't on a free or loan, which was the nail in the coffin for many. Acun has consistently lied to the fans about the finances, which has now led us to being second favourites for relegation when Acun's whole plan was to get promoted to the Premier League and win the Premier League. You know, there is a few positives you can say about Acun. You know, he doubled our attendance, got, you know, the fans believing in the 23/24 season. However, the fact that he come in, the club was debt-free, you know, no transfer embargoes. The club is in a bad position right now. Of course, we've sold the likes of Alfie Jones, Sean McLaughlin, João Pedro, Norden Amrabat this summer. We're also signing about 6 to 7 players this window, which isn't bad considering, you know, we cannot sign anyone who isn't a loan or a free. It's going to be interesting how the season goes. You know, Acun, he's really ruined the club. We're in a really big mess at the minute. But hopefully, you know, if our support's good enough, Sergej Jakovic, you know, gets the players playing well, then hopefully we can have a good season.